It's the end of the golden age of comic books, and we have a list that's really for the dogs. We're going to take a look at CGC census counts from 1955, perhaps the worst year in comic book history? Let's take a look at some key books up next on this video from Bronzeville Comics. Hello panelologists, this is Jim from Bronzeville Comics coming to you with another video. And before we get started, please like, comment, subscribe, and check out the description of this video for, the whatnot, the Instagram, the eBay store, and the email. We've been doing this yearly list. Every week we do another year of the top 10 books submitted to CGC for that year, plus a whole bunch of different keys. The top books submitted from each publisher at the time, and also some valuable books. We're here in 1955. This is the end of the Golden Age. Some people may claim the beginning of the Silver Age. It's the beginning of the Comics Code Authority. And we will make note of the books that are pre-code, which is a very small part of the year, versus the books that have the big old Comic Code stamp on them. And we're going to take... So what we do is I go to cgcdata.com. I only look at Universal Blue labels, and we go through the top 10 books counting down from 10 to 1, and then we look at other keys, the top books from each publisher, and the top books from DC of some of their more popular titles, the titles that carried through from the Golden Age: Superman, Batman, Detective Action, Adventure, Wonder Woman, and Superboy. So let's just dive into the list, and we're going to start with DC, a number 1 book from DC. And it's Brave and the Bold, number 1. This, as a big old Comic Code Authority stamp, it is from September 1955. And this is the first appearance of the Viking Prince, the Golden Gladiator, and the Silent Knight. The cover is by Joe Kubert, Russ Heath, and Jerry Grandinetti, I think in that order. So this is a classic DC book. This was what the format of Brave and the Bold was prior to the team-ups, right? Brave and the Bold later introduced some new characters and new teams. First appearance of the Suicide Squad, the Justice League of America, the Silver Age Hawkman, Metamorpho, the Teen Titans, and then it became a team-up book. Various characters, and then eventually, for the last 100-plus issues of its run, up through 200, it was a Batman team-up book. But here, the interesting thing about this particular book, it makes number 10 on the census, and there are no copies of this above an 8.0. This is an impossible book to find in grade. I'm not exactly sure why. That's kind of unique. Usually there are a couple books that survived even from 1955 and higher than 8.0 grade, but not so for Brave and the Bold number 1. And this is one of 143 copies on the census. Let's go to number 9 on the list, and it's EC Comics. It is Weird Science Fantasy number 27. This has a Wally Wood cover, classic Wally Wood sci-fi. You have the ray guns, the bubble helmets, there's a monster, and there's a lady in distress. This is from January-February 1955. It is pre-code, and these books, early part of the year, code hasn't yet come into effect, and EC was really the last one to hold on to pre-code because they didn't really have anything else. Once the code was in effect, EC was cooked. So this particular book, Weird Science Fantasy number 27, has a census count of 150. Another EC book comes in at number 7, and this is Tales from the Crypt number 46, which is from February-March of 1955. And this is in a tie for 7th. It is a Jack Davis cover, and this is the last EC horror comic. This was it. You got, what's that? I guess a werewolf on the cover. And you have the Storyteller's a Crypt Keeper, the Old Witch, and the Vault Keeper. Yeah, this was it. It was over. Pre-code horror is done. This is the last one. End of story. And then EC tried to, basically shift into some other titles, and it wasn't the same. It wasn't as successful, and they had held off the longest to do this. So this is the end of pre-code horror, right? Tales from the Crypt number 46 that has a census count of 167. That ties it with another EC book, and that is Mad number 22 with a Harvey Kurtzman cover, a special art issue. This is when Mad was still comic book sized. And I guess maybe the Cubist Picasso-esque art on the cover is what makes this an attractive book. I talked in the previous installments, as when Mad number 1 came out, it was at the top of the list, that this was a hugely popular magazine all throughout the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, and really was a strong part of the popular culture. And, there are fans that like the Mad magazines. So this also has a census count of 167. We go to number 6 on the list. And this is our first dog issue. This is Adventure Comics 210, the first appearance of Crypto, the Super Dog. This book has gotten really hot lately. I imagine a couple more might have come to Census just recently. It is a Cart Swan cover, the classic Superman / Superboy artist. Crypto appearing in that Superman trailer of the movie that we're going to see a little bit later on this year. Always been a popular book, and this kind of heightens it. The other interesting thing, this has the lowest average grade of all the books on the top 10 at 3.61, even lower than The Brave and the Bold, which doesn't have anything above an 8. I think the thing with Brave and the Bold, 1s and 2s are going to be much less likely to be submitted than this book. This book is more valuable. The other thing is, there are very few books from 1955 that are high in value. What I've been doing in recent years in this list is looking at books that are worth over $10,000, have sold on Heritage for over $10,000 in an 8 to an 8.5. Not finding them from 1955. Those gruesome pre-code horror covers, they don't make them anymore. So this Adventure Comics 210, obviously from March with the comic code stamp, and this has 173 copies on the census. Coming in at number 5 is Mad number 24, which is the first magazine-sized issue. This is also the first use of What Me Worry on the cover. Harvey Kurtzman cover with this border that has Alfred E. Newman on the top with the little What Me Worry underneath him. This new magazine is vital for you to read, and inside you will find an extremely important message from the editors. I don't know what that message is, but this, again, the first 23 issues were comic book sized. Everything else after that was magazine sized. And that's what I grew up with, was magazine sized, and it was known as Mad Magazine, not just Mad. I don't know if the actual title changed or that was just the way we referred to it, because, Mad is a fairly generic name. But this is has a census count of 226. To number 4 on the list, and our second dog appearance, this is Batman number 92, the first appearance of Ace the Bat Hound, which came out just 3 months after Crypto's first appearance. And this is a Win Mortimer cover, also has a Bat Signal and a Batmobile. Ace co-starred with Crypto in that animated DC Super Pets movie a few years ago. But it's interesting that there are more copies in the census of this than Crypto. I think Crypto's a more popular character, but I think Batman is a more collected book. And there aren't nearly as many Adventure Comics completionists as there are Batman completionists. There are a lot of people trying to, get the first 100 issues of Batman. Not a lot of people, because there aren't that many copies of the first 100 issues to go around. And so this is a little more difficult to find. Ace is not as popular as Crypto, but still a key Batman first appearance. And this has a census count of 251. Up next is from EC Comics, Weird Science Fantasy number 29. And they really held on. I talked about EC holding on. DC changed, I think in February cover date, they changed to Comics Code. But not so with EC. This is a cover date from May, June. This is the last pre-code issue. It is a classic Frank Frazetta cover. And even if it was code and it was toned down, it's going to be popular because it's a Frazetta cover. It is a great cover. I think it's a little bit muted by this border with the rocket ship blasting off on the left. And it's more classic science fiction. I don't think there's anything really, at least the cover isn't non-code. So the Frazetta cover is driving this. The fact that it's the last pre-code issue is, I think, also historically important. And I think for those two reasons, the census count goes up to 296 for this book. Number 2 on the list, a major first appearance. This is Detective Comics 225 and the first appearance of J'onn J'onzz, the Manhunter from Mars. When Waterman did this Batman cover, we are told that we have the new feature the Manhunter from Mars, or the Martian Manhunter, however you want to refer to him. But there are folks who point to his first appearance as the beginning of the Silver Age. Now, this is late in 1955. It's definitely Comics Code. Mean grade of 3.97. This is a very collectible book. But I don't think this ushers in the Silver Age. J'onn J'onzz was not a particularly popular character at this time. He was a backup feature in Detective, right? He was in backup along with Powwow Smith. He wasn't any more popular than Aquaman or Green Arrow, who just happened to continue all the way through. He gained his popularity in subsequent years. He was an original member of the Justice League of America in Brave and the Bold number 28. I think that's largely because DC had a very limited stable of superheroes to draw from. If you look at the superheroes that were set in the present day that could be put into a mainstream current continuity in Brave and the Bold 28, the only one they didn't include was Green Arrow. Realistically, there were no other superheroes, right? There was a Legion of Superheroes and Superboy. They're in the future. Superboy's in the past. Or they're duplicate powers like, Batwoman or Supergirl. There weren't that many unique characters. We hadn't yet gotten the Atom or Hawkman, who would subsequently join the Justice League. So they had to go to Martian Manhunter, right? And he wasn't really depicted as a superhero, but rather as a detective, a plainclothes detective who sometimes used his Martian powers to solve the case. He doesn't have like supervillains that he fights in these early stories. And in the Justice League, in the late 60s, he was kicked out. He wasn't a popular enough character to continue. And from 1968 until the early 1980s, he wasn't in DC continuity. He was way off in space. They pretty much ignored him other than a few stories here and there. It was subsequently, post-Crisis, he became a much bigger part of the Justice League. I think the animated series served him very well. He has been used in other instances and has become a major player in the Justice League. Really, kind of the backbone of the Justice League in many ways in animated form and what have you. But at the time, he didn't shift what was going on in comic books at the time. He didn't start anything. I don't think his appearances in these Detective Comics books really boosted sales to the point where we got to do more Martian Manhunter. It was like, we got to find some superheroes. Who do we have? Oh, that guy in Detective Comics, right? Powwow Smith wasn't going to be a member of the Justice League. They kind of made him more of a Superman kind of character, except Kryptonite, you had fire, and that's what kind of propelled him to be more of a superhero, and it was his reemergence years later that bumped him up. Anyway, all that about the Martian Manhunter. I like the character. I want a copy of this. There are 314 on the census. And the number 1 book, the most submitted book from 1955, is also a DC comic. It is an anniversary issue, Superman number 100, with a I don't know who did the cover. It doesn't mention. but it has this pastiche of issues 1, 25, 50, and 75. It was a big thing, Superman reaching 100. I'm going to say he was unique that he made it to issue 100, although, let me check my notes. Yeah, Captain Marvel and Captain Marvel Jr. both made it to issue 100 over at Fawcett. Their books came out a little more frequently, but anyway, for DC, this was the first individual titled book to make it to issue 100. Superman was the first one. He's the first superhero. He's a big deal, remained a big deal. And also remember, at this point in time, this was in the midst of the Superman TV series. This is a Comics Code book. It's from September, October of 55. I think the first color season of Adventures of Superman had come out. So really, Superman's continued popularity in the comics and the TV series, I think, really ushered in the Silver Age of comics. So this particular book, the top on the census, is at 338. Now, by comparison, 338, that's much less than what we had in 1954 for the top book, but about the same as what we had in 1953. So, still, I think a big book, a cool anniversary issue. Now, we want to go to other books outside the top 10 and other publishers. How about Atlas? Atlas was between Timely in the Golden Age and Marvel in the Silver Age. It was Atlas, and their top book here is Black Knight #1, the origin and first appearance of the middle-aged Black Knight, or the medieval Black Knight, not middle-aged, not like he was 40. It is written by Stan Lee with cover and art by Joe Maneely, who I talked about extensively in the last episode, who passed away, 3 years after this. Was a favorite of Stan Lee during the Atlas days, but sadly passed away before Marvel Comics got going. This character is subsequently related to Dane Whitman, the Avengers character who was a superhero in the 1960s. And this era of Atlas, there were a few books coming out, and there are collectors that like to focus on them because there weren't many of this. This particular title ran for 5 issues. From 55 to 56. So it didn't have a long run, and which makes it fairly collectible. It is fairly expensive, I will tell you that. And also the average census, the mean grade is 3.62, and the census count is 140. How about the top book from Dell? It's Uncle Scrooge #8, Carl Barks cover and story. Carl Barks, we talked about plenty of times before. If you're interested, look up some stuff, get some of the reprinted editions. Really fun stuff. This is a book from it's actually December 54, January 55, so we included in the 55 list. It doesn't have code, the comics code. It's pre-comics code, but Dell never adopted the comics code because they didn't have to. They were deemed wholesome enough that parents weren't concerned. Dell did not publish pre-code horror. They were doing Disney stuff. They were doing some offshoots like Turok and other things that were in 4-color, but nothing that really would have gone against the grain of the Comics Code Authority. So you're going to see in subsequent years, there's just no Comics Code Authority stamp for a number of years at least on these books. Into the 1980s, there was no Comics Code. So they just never, Dell, Western Gold Key never did Comics Code. But we will be looking at Comics Code for the rest. This has a census count of 94. Talking about Atlas, another #1 from this point in time with another Joe Maneely cover is Rawhide Kid #1. Atlas had published pre-code horror, so they're looking at other genres. Kind of more action-adventure in terms of Black Knight than... similar to Brave and the Bold #1, which had the Shining Knight and Robin Hood. Was it Robin Hood? No, the Golden Gladiator. Robin Hood came on later. And Westerns. So Rawhide Kid #1, first appearance of the Rawhide Kid, a Joe Maneely cover, and this has a census count of 66. From DC, World's Finest Comics number 74, with a Kurt Swan and Ray Burnley cover. Superman gets his own signal. Superman-Batman team-ups had begun the year before, and they were continuing here. This was, again, one of DC's more popular titles, and it kind of bumps up here higher on the list. Interesting, this is January, February, no Comics Code stamp. And if we look at Rawhide Kid, that was from March, no Comics Code stamp on that one either. World's Finest has 65 on the census. Up next is Eastern Color, their top book from the year. And this is from January. This is Famous Funnies number 215, one of those famous Frank Frazetta covers, Buck Rogers. We talked about that a lot in the previous year. There's a run of, 8 issues. Was it 210 to 217, where he did the covers for Famous Funnies. Collectors love these. The cover art is amazing. Here, this underwater, I guess that's underwater, or the underwater, and the woman in the tentacles, the guy with the ray gun. This is Eastern Color's top book, and I think there were only a few issues after this, and Famous Funnies was done. Issue number 215 has a census count of 63. I'm going to briefly go back to DC Comics. And by the way, Famous Funnies, this is from January, no Comics Code stamp. DC Comics is My Greatest Adventure number 1. This has a John Prentice cover. This is science fiction, really. It is pre-code. It's a January, February book, no Comics Code stamp. This is the book that introduced the Doom Patrol, and later on its title changed to Doom Patrol. Prior to that, it was just a science fiction anthology, and there are 60 copies of this on the census. Next book on the list is the top book from U.S. Pictorial, and this is Captain Gallant, number 1, which was does have a Don Heck cover, which was based on an NBC TV series starring Buster Crabbe. Buster Crabbe had played Flash Gordon and Buck Rogers in movie serials. I think he did Tarzan once, and he first gained fame as winning the 400-meter freestyle swimming gold medal at the 1932 Olympics in Los Angeles. The only American man to win swimming gold in L.A. in 32. Plenty won in 84, but that's an entirely different story. I'm not sure. This just says 1955. There is no Comics Code stamp on this. It was based on a TV series. He was in the French Foreign Legion, and I guess his little pal Cuffy was some sort of mascot. Based on the NBC television series Captain Gallant and the Foreign Legion. Or maybe it's Captain Gallant. I'm not sure. 46 copies on the census. I'm going to go to a book. This is the top Action Comics book of the year. This is Action Comics 200, which isn't really billed as one, but it is an anniversary issue as well. It does have a Win Mortimer cover of these Native Americans attacking Superman to no avail. I'm not sure why they are. But this is the top Action Comics book from the year with a census count of 44. From Ajax Farrell Publications, this is Phantom Lady number 5. He didn't do the cover, but interior art by Matt Baker. Of course, Matt Baker's Phantom Lady covers are hugely popular from like the mid to late 40s. But Phantom Lady was still hanging on here. This is from the beginning of 54, end of 55. By the way, the Action Comics was from January, no Comics Code stamp. And I'm wondering if collectors kind of like to get that end of the golden age right before the Comics Code Authority, even when the subject matter is not related. But this one, just Phantom Lady with Matt Baker, interior art, top book from Ajax Farrell. The census count is 35. From Harvey Publications, interestingly, they did a lot of pre-code horror. And this is Thrills of Tomorrow, number 19. It's the last pre-code issue. It's from February. And it reprints Stuntman. I'm going to guess that this was a horror title that they had to change gears quite quickly and find something to put in the issue. A lot of other publishers just changed titles and changed genres entirely. We'll see a few of those later on. This is, I'm pretty sure it's a Simon and Kirby cover. Either that or somebody is imitating Simon and Kirby. They did the original Stuntman. Yeah, reprints here in Thrills of Tomorrow, number 19, that has a census count of 35. The top Wonder Woman book from the year is Wonder Woman number 70, an Irv Novick cover of Wonder Woman pulling this boat along. This has a census count of 35. And this one is from October, so it does have a Comics Code stamp. The top book from Quality Comics. Quality Comics was still publishing Black Hawk, Plastic Man, GI Combat, Heartthrobs, Robin Hood. I think in 56 is when they're acquired by DC. This is the only issue of Intrigue. I guess Quality Comics got the memo late as that pre-code horror was over. This is published in January, no Comics Code stamp. The Corpse That Wouldn't Die, that would not fly under the Comics Code, and there are 32 copies on the Census, which ties it with another Ajax Farrell book that I included. This is the last pre-code issue of Phantom Lady. It's Phantom Lady number 2. This is from February, March. And that's about the time. February, March is where you're going to see your last code issues. When you get into March, April, May, everything's going to have the comic code stamp on it. This also has a census count of 32. The top book from Avon is Strange Worlds, number 19. This is from February. No comics code stamp. It is a robot cover. It's got all those sci-fi tropes. The ray gun, the robots, the bubble helmet, the woman in distress. I don't know if this would have been approved by the Comics Code. I don't think the cover gives us anything that says it wouldn't. But this is Avon's top book from February. No Comics Code stamp. Census count of 29. From top book from St. John Publications. This is Diary Secrets number 30. It is from September and does have a Comics Code stamp. It is a Matt Baker cover. And, Matt Baker's doing a lot of romance. The romance books are out there. They're harder to find than other genres of this point in time. But people are going to try to find some Matt Baker stuff. It's especially hard to find a high grade. So there are and we're going to see the census counts are going to get really small as we go publisher to publisher. As, we're moving away from DC and EC for first couple months in DC. And then that's it. These publishers are barely hanging on. Or they're publishing the kind of content that folks really aren't collecting, in great degree now. So this is the top book from St. John with a census count of 28. The top Superboy book. This is the last pre-code issue, a January cover date. I think DC changed over in February, maybe in March for some titles, but in January. This is Superboy 38. It does have a Kurt Swan and Ray Burnley cover, and it has a census count of 24. And maybe DC found, looking at this, hey, monkeys sell. Let's put some monkeys on the cover. We're going to see monkey covers throughout the 60s from DC. I'm sure popping up on this list. Another St. John book and another Matt Baker cover. This is Cinderella Love, number 29. I love this cover. This is a really cool cover. It just screams 50s to me. The wooden tennis racket and the old style convertible, the guy with the short shorts and the sweater tied around his neck, just country club of 1950s. Very interesting. It's from October, so it has a Comics Code stamp, and it has a census count of 24. The top book from Prize Publications. This is Fighting American number 6, February, March, 1955. No Comics Code stamp. It is a Jack Kirby and Joe Simon cover. And people are going to collect that. Fighting American was, I think, kind of a Cold War era answer to Captain America, and Simon and Kirby were going out and, going to all these different publishers and doing all these different genres. This was one of them. This is the last issue of the series, issue number 6. And it sits with a census count of 24. Our next book is the top book from Magazine Enterprises. It's The Avenger, #1, with a Bob Powell cover. Bob Powell did a lot of the Fiction House, a lot of the Sheena covers. Quite a popular artist in that regard. So this is The Avenger #1. This is an early Comics Code. It is a February-March cover date with a Comics Code stamp. Now, I don't know if all publishers at the time were all lined up with their cover dates and when the books actually came out. But the Red Menace meets America's newest hero, the Avenger. They're capitalizing on the Cold War ethos at the time to try to reinvigorate superheroes. It's kind of interesting to see a new superhero from a different publisher. Not one that really lasted. Census count of 24. Top book from our old friends at Archie. And this is, this is Archie Giant Series Magazine #2, Archie's Christmas Stocking. The second year, this would be like, I think, an annual that would be Christmas themed. And this obviously came out later in the year around Christmas time. Does have the Comics Code stamp. I guess, I don't know if we'll see any innuendo covers from Archie for quite a while. But this was Archie's top book with a census count of 23. From Farrell, their top book. Check it out. January, February. This is Voodoo #19. January, February. It has Matt Baker interior art, not the cover. And it has this jungle action theme and bondage. Pretty sure bondage. We'd have to check Wonder Woman covers. I don't think the Comic Code was approving bondage covers. This is the last issue. It is a pre-code issue, and it continued the numbering with Voodoo, #20. I am not at all familiar with Voodoo. Was that a female hero who did have a Comic Code Authority approval? Introducing Jungle Princess Voodoo. And she held it down for 3 issues. Hard books to find. They're worth several $100s, by the way. But Voodoo #19 is the top book on the census from Farrell, and it has a count of 23. The top book from Superior Comics is Mysteries #11. This is the last issue. It's from January 55. And it does have kind of a pre-code horror vibe. A really kind of crude artwork on the cover. But, yeah, the guy with the hump and the mysterious gaslights, the woman with the gun. Nope, not going to see that anymore. January, goodbye. Mysteries #11 has 20 copies on the census. Top book from Ace Periodicals. There's actually a tie. One of them is Baffling Mysteries, #24. This is from January 55. It is the last pre-code issue. This looks more like adventure, where there's a Viking trapped in a glacier for thousands of years. But it is pre-code, and it has a census count of 18, which ties it with another Ace Periodicals book, Beyond #30. This also is the last issue. This is also from January 55, and it is pre-code. And you have this kind of, I guess, ghost of a pharaoh rising from the tomb in Egypt. Nope, not going to see that anymore. Nope, goodbye. Not good. Comic Code isn't going to approve this. Goodbye to Beyond. Let's move on. We're never going to see that again. This also has a census count of 18. Top book from Master Publications, Dark Mysteries #22. This is from March of 1955. And this has a census count of 17. Also pre-code horror vibe. Not going to see that anymore. Census count of 17. This is the top book from Trojan. Yeah, there were 2 Bewares. There was a Beware #13, which is actually #1 in 1953. This is the 1955 version. This is Beware #13 from January of 1955. Does have a very much an EC vibe. This is not Comics Code approved. There's a haunted house thing going on. There it is, the house that dear Aunt Hannah gave us for our wedding present. It's terrible, Tom. This is going to be the weirdest honeymoon 2 people ever had. A tale of strange and incredible, the unlucky 13th, plus other features crammed with mystery and thrills. Pre-code horror. Yeah, Yeah, this is definitely pre-code, and they have that little stripe on the side that kind of was popularized by EC. We do see in other publishers. Beware, the top Trojan book has a census count of 16. That ties it with the top book from Standard Comics, which is Dennis the Menace, number 10. Covered by Hank Ketchum. Do not ask me why. Number 10 is the top book on the census, but it is. Dennis the Menace was a popular character. When did it would be the TV show was not yet in existence. The TV show premiered, I'm gonna say it was definitely, I think it was definitely later than this. It was a comic strip. It premiered in 1959, the TV series. The comic strip premiered in 1951, and he did get a comic book pretty quickly. It was very common. You know, he's one of those characters, much like Richie Rich or Archie or Casper the Friendly Ghost, that had these humor titles that aren't as widely collected today. And really, collectors aren't slabbing them because the value isn't tremendously high. So Dennis the Menace number 10 has a census count of 16, and that puts it in a three-way tie with the top book from Mainline Publications. This is Foxhole number 4 with an awesome Jack Kirby cover. Another Simon Kirby smash hit. Now this is from March, April 55, and it does have the Comics Code stamp. So Foxhole number 1 made the list for 1954. This is 1955, and this also has a census count of 16. The top book from Charlton Comics is Bullseye number 7. This also is Simon and Kirby. Bullseye was with Mainline for issues 1 through 5, and then Charlton published issues 6 and 7. I don't know if they were connected or one bought out the other or what the story was. This is from later in the year. This is from August, and it does have the Comics Code Authority stamp. I guess Bullseye was a Western hero who also had maybe Native American blood. I'm not sure of the story. And this is the final issue of the series, and it has a census count of 14. The top book from Merit is Beware number 15. This is Harry Harrison cover. This is from May, and it does have the Comics Code Authority. It is a little creepier looking. Basically, these two folks are digging for pirate's gold, and there's somebody coming in. It almost looks like a pirate ghost. So this might be one of the more fantastical things. It does have that Beware right there on the side where later Marvel would put a Marvel box that was kind of brought over from EC, and it has a census count of 13. That ties it with another Charlton book. I found this one interesting. This is Blue Beetle number 18. Superhero Resurgence. This is a character that Fox Feature Syndicate had in the Golden Age. Charlton got the rights, which eventually led to the Ted Kord Blue Beetle that DC acquired and led to Jaime Reyes and the movie, etc., etc. This is the Dan Garrett version. This is the first issue of the series. It had formerly been The Thing, which is a pre-code horror book. This is from February. Interestingly, this is from February 1955, and they changed the title from a pre-code horror title to a superhero title, and it doesn't have a Comics Code stamp just yet. So I think that's kind of interesting. Particular run of the Blue Beetle lasted just 4 issues. And then he would have to come back. He did get another Charlton title. I don't know if these are reprints or not. He did get another 5 issues in 64-65 from Charlton, and then took over another title for another 5 issues. And then Ted Kord took over. That's all Dan Garrett stuff. So anyway, Blue Beetle number 18, also a census count of 13. The next book on the list. This is the top book from Story Comics. It is Mysterious Adventures number 24. Now this, I think, is another interesting one, right? This is right on the precipice, right on the borderline. It is from March. And it has a Comics Code Authority stamp, right? So it says, look, it's Angela. What is she doing here at the old mine? She comes to the old mine every night seeking what? It's just an old mine. Now, I don't know. To me, that looks like a grave. And notice the old mine on the cover, the words are highlighted, they're bold. I'm thinking it's replacement lettering to get past the Comics Code Authority. That's what I'm thinking. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And why is this guy dressed like, he's a Minuteman? Thrilling Tales of Mystery. It looks like pre-code horror, but it got a Comics Code stamp. And this book has a census count of 12. We're dwindling census counts right now. We still have several books to go. Top book from Sterling is Captain Flash #1 with a Mike Sikowski cover, where Captain Flash, the origin of Captain Flash, he's riding this atomic rocket, like he's Slim Pickens. And Captain Flash lasted just 4 issues. Again, notice though, we're seeing more and more superheroes, either reprints or new characters. We're seeing the Avenger, Captain Flash, Blue Beetle, Stuntman. I think the Superman TV series is leading to kind of a resurgence of superheroes, but it'll be another year before they got characters that really caught on. And the other publishers it didn't really work for. I guess they were saying, we can't do pre-code horror anymore. Let's try some superheroes. Some of these publishers did. And Captain Flash has a census count of 11. That ties us in with the top book from Gilberton, which is Classics Illustrated number 124. War of the Worlds, a painted cover. This is the first edition. With Classics Illustrated, they have what's called an HRN number. If you look at the back cover of a Classics Illustrated book, there'll be a list of all the books they have available. And I forget exactly. Highest reorder number, I think is what it stands for. So if it's brand new, the HRN should be the same as the issue number. If it's higher, like you might see an HRN of 164. That means they put out another 40 books after this first came out, and this is like a second and third printing. So anyway, Classics Illustrated 124, War of the Worlds, has 11 copies in the census. Mysterious Stories #3 is the top book from Premier Group. Now, Classics Illustrated, that is January, no Comics Code stamp. Captain Flash is November. No, it's November 54. Somehow it's in my 55 list. Whatever. Mysterious Stories #3. This is from April of 1955. It does have a Comics Code stamp. It is George Woodbridge and Angelo Torres cover. And this has a little bit of pre-code horror vibes. It's the Witch Doctor. He's warned us he would escape. We left him in Africa, but look, he's coming out of the jar we took from his temple. So evidently, there were certain things that you couldn't do in the Comics Code. You couldn't have monsters like zombies and vampires, but blatant racism was fine. So, yeah, this particular book has 11 copies on the census. Moving right along. The top book from Fuller Publishing is Popo of the Popcorn Theater. This is a clown book. Interestingly, this is from October. No Comics Code stamp. Charles Biro cover, who had done, so much work for Lev Gleason. I don't know about Popo or the Popcorn Theater, but there are people that know enough about it that there are 10 copies on the census. The top book from Argo Publishing is Alley Oop #1. Yes, I have it on my list. I have to go back and forth to the front and back of my list. Alley Oop #1. This was a newspaper strip about a caveman. And of course, he gave his name to a play in basketball. I don't know why he's on a dinosaur as a caveman and she's a Native American. Not sure how that works. This is the top book from Argo, 9 on the census. The top book from Gilmore is Climax #1. This is also... Alley-Oop didn't have a Comics Code stamp. That was from November. So these ones that are kind of more cartoony, I guess didn't need them. Climax #1. Suspense, mystery, and intrigue. And it's kind of a sideways-ish panel, I guess. It is from Gilmore Magazines and has a census count of 9. From Commercial Comics, The H-Bomb and You. Again, I don't know that much about this book. This is probably one of those warning things. Definitely a sign of the times, Cold War, duck and cover, all that kind of stuff. Smaller book. If you know more about this book than I do, you can pop in the comments below. This also has a census count of 9. And finally, there's another book. The top from Nesbit is Superior Stories #1. This is a retelling of The Invisible Man. It does have a Comics Code stamp. It's a Pete Morisi cover, who later on would create Peter Cannon Thunderbolt, the Charlton Comics character, upon whom Ozymandias of The Watchmen was based. This Superior has a census count of 9. From the top book from Ziff Davis Publishing is G.I. Joe #38. Interestingly, this is from April. No Comics Code stamp. Woman's in bondage. She's getting her out of bondage. She has a red dress on. Also, painted cover by Clarence Dorr. Would this have floated under the Comics Code? I'm not sure, but it only has a census count of 8. From American Comics Group, we have a tie for their top book. It is Commander Battle and the Atomic Sub #5. A 3D effect story. This is from March, April, has the Comics Code stamp, Underwater, Big Fish, yada yada. And it's tied with issue #6 of the same series with a Sheldon Moldoff cover and a Comics Code stamp. These both have 7 copies on the census. The top book from Toby Press is John Wayne Adventures #30. Photo cover, no Comics Code stamp, 7 copies on the census. What's up next? The top book from Key Comics is Key Publications is Navy Patrol #1. An Alice Kirkpatrick cover. 6 copies on the census. The top book from Ribbage is Secret Mysteries #7. This has a March cover date and no Comics Code Authority stamp. It's a Myron Fast cover, and it is definitely pre-code horror. They held on. They held on as long as they could. Look at the fantastic thing in the old chest. It must have been lying here for a couple of 100 years. Close it, quick. I can't bear to look. It's enough to give anyone the creeps. A strange tale packed with thrills and suspense. The Deadly Diamond. Yeah, they were holding on. No Comics Code stamp in March. 6 copies on the census. The top book from Aragon is Battlefire #1. This is from April. It has a Comic Code stamp. 5 copies on the census. The top book from Lev Gleason, still holding on. This is Crime Does Not Pay #141. Charles Bureau cover. It's from January. No Comics Code stamp. Who is it, Mike? Muggsy's Boys? No worse. The cops. What do we do? Run or fight? You really mean run or burn, don't you? Yeah, they were getting this Crime Does Not Pay book. Not a highly collectible book. 5 copies on the census. And another publisher that has 5 copies on the census is, it's actually another Lev Gleason book. I'm sorry. It is Adventures in Wonderland, #1 from April with a Comics Code stamp. And it also has 5 copies on the census. So that's going to do it for 1955. End of the Golden Age. End of pre-code horror. Beginning of the Comics Code Authority. I can take a wild guess as to what the #1 book from 1956 is going to be, but things are going to change. They're not going to change as rapidly in 1956. It's probably, I mean, Marvel doesn't come on for another 5 years after that. DC's going to do kind of a slow build up. But we're going to see, I think, increasing, we do have some keys with Batman and Superman. So it's going to be interesting to see what books populate the top of the census and what other titles, what other genres and publishers are popular as the Silver Age begins. So this is the 22nd installment of this series. We started with pre-1934. Actually, I guess it's the 23rd installment. Pre-1934. We're going to go all the way till 2025 because we still have, at this point, another 70 years to dive into. And by the time we get to that point, it'll be 2026 doing this weekly, and we'll be able to look at the top books from 2025. So I hope you've enjoyed this. Guys, share it. Let your friends know. I know this is a long watch, but I know that the people who watch this do appreciate this. I do appreciate the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. You can take a look at a couple of my other videos here. And this is Jim saying until next time, enjoy your comics.